Jay here for Stretford, Paddock. That's Joe Smith. We've got a bit of breaking news. As you can probably see from the thumbnail, Manchester United have issued a statement. Mason Greenwood is leaving the club. I'm going to get your reaction in a minute, and we are live, so we'll hear your reaction as well. So do get involved in the comments. But first of all, let's just go through the club statement that's been released. So we've been waiting for this, been waiting to find out what happened with Mason Greenwood. I had it in my news this morning that I think Ornstein suggested there was going to be some sort of statement today. That has happened. The club and Mason Greenwood via the club have released this statement. So I'm going to read through it and then you can get involved. And like I said, please do get involved in the comments as well. So from the club, it says, Manchester United has concluded its internal investigation into the allegations made against Mason Greenwood. Our process commenced in February 2023, following all charges against Mason being dropped. Throughout, we have taken into account the wishes, rights and perspective of the alleged victim, along with the club's standards and values, and sought to collate as much information and context as possible. This has required us to proceed with sensitivity and care to obtain evidence not in the public domain, including from those with direct knowledge of the case. Based on the evidence available to us, we have concluded that the material posted online did not provide a full picture and that Mason did not commit the offences in respect of which he was originally charged. That said, as Mason publicly acknowledges today, he has made mistakes which he is taking responsibility for. All those involved, including Mason, recognise the difficulties with him recommencing his career at Manchester United. It has therefore been mutually agreed that it would be most appropriate for him to do so away from Old Trafford, and we will now work with Mason to achieve that outcome. So that's the statement from the club.
Yep.
He's going away from United. It's a bit, he's not done anything wrong, but he has. It's a bit sort of
we'll get into
contradictory in its sort of statement, but the short and long of it is they feel that they've done their investigation and it's not feasible for him to continue at Manchester United. We'll get into that in a minute because we know there's different points of view for that in terms of were they going to keep him and was there a bit of a backlash and then they changed their mind. But anyway, this is the Greenwood statement in sort of on the back of this as well. I want to start by saying I understand that people will judge me because what they have seen and heard on social media, and I know people will think the worst. I was brought up to know that violence or abuse in any relationship is wrong. I did not do the things I was accused of, and in February I was cleared of all charges. However, I fully accept I made mistakes in my relationship, and I take my share of responsibility for the situations which led to the social media post. I am learning to understand my responsibilities to set a good example as a professional footballer, and I am focused on the big responsibility of being a father, as well as a good partner. Today's decision has been part of a collaborative process between Manchester United, my family, and me. The best decision for us all is for me to continue my football career away from Old Trafford, where my presence will not be a distraction for the club. I thank the club for their support since I joined age 7. There will always be a part of me which is United. I am enormously grateful to my family and all my loved ones for their support, and it is now for me to repay the trust those around me have shown. I intend to be a better footballer, but most importantly, a good father, a better person, and to use my talents in a positive way on and off the pitch. So you've had the two statements there, one from Mason Greenwood, one from Manchester United. It seems a bit like I'm not admitting or saying that what I was accused of, I did. The club is saying we don't think he did what he was accused of or what he was charged with, but he's made mistakes and it's no longer feasible for him to continue at the club. Joe, there's a lot to take in there. Appreciate, bro. Just give us your thoughts on this decision.
Personally, I think it's the right decision.
Yeah.
It's an interesting statement. I'm slightly surprised at the angle that they've gone with on the statement, and we can maybe get into that a bit more. I think that it's surprising to me that it took the sort of public backlash of the rumours and reports that they were going to bring him back. That backlash then came, and then off the back of that is where they've gone in this direction with it. I've got two thoughts on the way that the statement is phrased initially.
Yeah.
Like you said, it's slightly contradictory or slightly surprising that they've gone down the route of he hasn't done what you think he's done, but we're letting him go anyway. So why are you letting him leave then? What's the reason? If he hasn't done what you say he's done, or what people think he's done, or what we've heard him do, why is he leaving? So why aren't, that's one thing, one question that I think, I would like to see answered. The other one is, on the other hand, I do appreciate that, legally this case has been dropped. So I can understand why United don't come out and say, no, he's done it anyway. Because that also would potentially be libelous, first of all, legally. And secondly, that doesn't really make sense with the situation. So I can kind of get why they've not come out and said he has to leave because he's done X, Y, and Z, because they've got no legal standing on which to say that. Yeah. However, it does feel as though it's a little bit of, we don't want to let him go, but you lot have made us do it. The whole what was the final phrasing on the reaction or something? Sorry.
So it says here
the difficulties with him recommencing his career at Manchester United. That basically means you lot won't have it. We want to. He hasn't done it. Just so you know, he hasn't done anything wrong, but because of you lot kicking up a fuss, we can't have him back. Is kind of, if you want to be slightly cynical, how that reads a little bit. What do you make of it?
Yeah, I think the whole sort of issue with this is the club don't emerge from this with any credit for me.
No.
The club haven't taken a moral stance. They haven't done their investigation. Seeing that there's issues there that are not, shall we say, becoming of a Manchester United player, and they think, we can't employ someone who, he's not committed the crimes that he's been accused of, but we've seen behaviours we're not happy with, so that doesn't fit in with what we expect from Manchester United players. We're going to let him go. We all know that's not the case.
No, and they've not even tried to say that.
No, we all know that the plan was to bring him back into the squad. Yeah. And we saw that because I think it was in The Athletic that Adam Crafton and other people reported that Manchester United had this plan with Richard Arnold doing a statement with an interview with Mason Greenwood and all the rest of it, where we were going to see Mason Greenwood be announced as part of the Manchester United squad. Apparently Eric Ten Hag, and I like Eric Ten Hag, I think he's a great manager, was okay with it. So again, he doesn't come out of this looking like he's covered himself in glory, in my opinion. There's a massive backlash. Politicians getting involved. Listen, I could care less what politicians say about football. I think half of them just use it as a prop. But there was some, you can understand where a lot of them are coming from when it comes to the issues that this case has brought up, or this issue has brought up. So they were making statements. You had a massive backlash from charities. You had just the online sort of, I don't want to use the word outrage because I think that people got outraged at everything. There's a reason people were upset about this. I get it. There was a real sort of clamour from people to say, look, this isn't okay. The club obviously thought, this doesn't work, this is untenable. So now we've reacted to that. So it's like a U-turn, basically. Yeah. That's how it feels to me. Because it feels as though the club are going, look, we're going to bring him back in. Let's test the water. Or maybe not even let's test the water. It got leaked. Yeah. The backlash was immense. And they thought, crikey, we've got no way of pursuing that, of his reintegration into the squad. So we're going to have to let him go. We're going to have to move him on because it just doesn't work because the backlash has been too much to cope with. That's how it feels to me. Yeah. I mean, I might be wrong, and I will get into people's comments in a minute because I know it's a very divisive topic. There was a lot of people that said never wanted to see Mason Greenwood play football for Manchester United again. Some people say don't want to see him play football full stop. Others saying he's not been charged or he's not been convicted. He deserves a second chance. So I get there's sort of mixed emotions here, but I think the one constant for me anyway is I don't think the club handled it in any way where you can go, well, the club handled that in the right way. No. Even the whole investigation seemed a little bit like, okay, you're doing your investigation, which I understand because just because someone's not been convicted of a crime doesn't mean that the club or the employer can't do their own investigation. So I understand all that. But that seems to be getting to the point where it's like, okay, you've done your investigation. What is happening now? If it's concluded, which we all gather it is, why has nothing been done about it? Then we had this story coming out that it was going to be brought back in. Now we have this sort of statement saying that he's gonna go. Just give us your thoughts, and I'm going to get into some comments because apparently I think there's some more on this. I think there might be an open letter from Richard Arnold as well. Which
let's get into that. Yeah, the way United have handled it is regardless of what you think of the situation, is undeniably shambolic, isn't it? Because assuming that the Adam Crafton article in The Athletic was correct, which again we've talked about this, typically The Athletic are very reliable. Adam Crafton is a very reliable journalist. Yeah. Assuming what he said is correct, this is literally just a oh shit U-turn, isn't it? It is. It undoubtedly is.
It is, and Sorry, I didn't mean to insult you there.
No, yeah, I forgot extra
There's an open letter from Richard Arnold as well. So this has been picked up. He says here, I mean, I'm reading it from the Manchester Evening News. It's all over outlets. Richard Arnold's open letter to Manchester United fans on Mason Greenwood. So United Chief Executive Richard Arnold has written an open letter to fans explaining a bit more about what's gone on here. So you've had this club statement. Now you've got this statement from Richard Arnold, which is hopefully going to shed a bit of light. This is the first time I'm reading this, by the way. So you'll have to bear with me.
Yep.
Dear fans, now that we have concluded and announced the outcome of the club's investigation into Mason Greenwood, I want to be direct and transparent with our fans about the process and the reasons for our decision. This was an internal disciplinary investigation between employer and employee, which would ordinarily take place outside of the public eye. Given the public nature of the allegations and Mason's profile, I acknowledge that this was not an ordinary situation, but I felt it's important that we still follow due process and, so far as possible, avoid media comment until I had made a definitive decision. When audio footage and imagery was posted online in January 2022, my feelings were of shock and concern for the alleged victim. Her welfare, wishes and perspective have been central to the club's approach ever since, as have the club's standards and values. While we immediately concluded that Mason should be suspended pending investigation, we were also conscious for our duty of care towards him and the importance of making a decision based on full information. Until February this year, this was a matter for the police and the Crown Prosecution Service. It was only when charges were dropped that the club discussed the allegations with Mason and others involved in the case. Our investigation sought to collate as much evidence as possible to establish facts and context. This was not a quick or straightforward process for a variety of reasons. It was essential for us to respect the rights and wishes of the alleged victim. Also, we have limited powers of investigation, which meant we were reliant on third-party cooperation. Timings have also been influenced by my desire to minimise the impact of the investigation on our men's and women's teams, as well as our Lionesses. I acknowledge that this gave more time for speculation, but the alternative would have been to compromise due process or create untimely disruption. While we were unable to access certain evidence for reasons we respect, the evidence we did collate led us to conclude that Mason did not commit the acts he was charged with. I am restricted as to what I can say for legal reasons, including the alleged victim's ongoing right to anonymity, but I am able to share the following with you, which should give you some insight into the complexity of the case. Now some bullet points. The alleged victim requested the police to drop their investigation in April 2022. We were provided with alternative explanations for the audio recording, which was a short excerpt from a much longer recording of the images posted online. The alleged victim's family participated in the process and were given the opportunity to review and correct our factual findings. Last week, the media reported that we had decided to reintegrate Mason and the elements of a plan to do so had been leaked to them. Reintegration was one of the outcomes we considered and planned for. For context, over the course of the past 6 months, several outcomes have been contemplated and planned for, and my view has evolved as our process progressed. While the ultimate decision rested with me, I was taking various factors and views into account right up until the point of finalising my decision. While I am satisfied that Mason did not commit the acts he was charged with, Mason's accepted that he has made mistakes which he takes responsibility for. I am also mindful of the challenge that Mason would face rebuilding his career and raising a baby together with his partner in the harsh spotlight of Manchester United. Further, this case has provoked strong opinions, and it is my responsibility to minimise any distraction to the unity we are seeking within the club. Although we have decided that Mason will seek to rebuild his career away from Manchester United, that does not signal the end of this matter. The club will continue to offer its support both to the alleged victim and Mason to help them rebuild and move forward positively with their lives. Thank you for your continued support, Richard Arnold. So quite a lengthy statement.
Yeah, very.
From Richard Arnold there, where he's tried to explain the thinking behind it. Again, it still comes back to this idea that what you heard on that recording isn't the full story. He hasn't done what he's been accused of, but he's made other mistakes that he's taking responsibility for. And it does feel a little bit like almost saying he's not done what you think he's done. Or he's not done anything wrong as much as we need to move him on so it's better for everyone. Which it's a little bit ambiguous. It's a little bit contradictory in a way, because it's not sort of going out and saying this is completely unacceptable. Yeah. He has to go. yet it's still saying he's got to go.
And also,
If you get what I mean.
Yeah,
I
and
know
it's strange
it's difficult to explain.
he's willing to say that recording is part of a larger recording, but then obviously we aren't going to hear the longer recording. So if it proves that he's innocent, why aren't we hearing it? I know, I guess there are a lot of legal things behind that, but do you know what I mean? Richard Arnold is willing to say, actually, there is a longer recording that exists that that has been made available to us that proves he is innocent, but you lot can't hear it. That's slightly odd. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you know, Manchester United as a football club is willing to say publicly on two different statements now, one from Richard Arnold directly, one from Manchester United, that he didn't do the things he said he did, when we as the general public...
Just on that though, I think you're right, but if you're just going through to what he says on the audio recording bit, we were provided with alternative explanations for the audio recording, which was a short excerpt for a much longer recording, and for the images posted online. So that might even be he's only heard that short recording, but he's been told, you haven't heard the full bit.
But in that case, then I would be surprised. So you're just taking someone on face value.
Well, that's
then?
For me. I'm just going off.
Do you think that's what he's saying?
I'm going off factually what that says.
Yeah.
Which for the audio recording, which was a short excerpt, we were provided with alternative explanations for the audio recording, which was a short excerpt from a much longer recording.
Okay. Now, well, if that is the case, then
I'm not saying he hasn't. He might have heard the longer recording.
Yeah.
But he's not saying he has.
Okay.
He's saying
there is a longer recording.
Yeah.
And he's saying we've been provided with alternative explanations, which, you know, regardless of what you think, whether you think he did anything wrong or you do or you don't, that's not proof of anything, then, is it?
I think that part of his statement is slightly irresponsible.
Me too.
I think that's almost throwing the victim under the bus, the alleged victim under the bus, a little bit. That's sort of saying, well, you don't know the full story.
Yeah.
If you heard the full recording, you'd think otherwise. That's kind of what I'm getting from it. I might be wrong, and by all means, I'm not judge and jury on this situation. No. Get involved in the comments and let us know what you think. I'm going to go to some comments because I appreciate you've had 3 statements there that you've had to sit through and listen to. It is quite complex, and there's a lot of United trying to cover the back. A lot of United still feeling towards protecting Mason Greenwood. There's Mason Greenwood obviously trying to protect himself and explain himself. It's all just very deflating in it that we're at this point as Manchester United fans where this is even a thing, but it is, and we're having to deal with it. Obviously. We're having to, talk about it. And obviously, there's people that have got bigger fish to fry in terms of them closer to it. Give it to Mike, he says. He's coming back. He's not coming back. Blah, blah, blah. This whole saga is symbolic of how unstable this club is and has been. Tina Tefson to Totoka says, is Mason now on the transfer list or will he leave and can we use that money he gets in wage on a new player? I don't know. There's nothing I can see on that one, to be fair. I don't know if he's on the transfer list. I don't know if he's been released. That doesn't seem clear to me. I'm sure it will become clearer as the days progress. Culture Couture, they have to say, so there's no legal response.
That was my thinking, is that them saying he hasn't done the things he's been accused of, or we don't think he has, they couldn't really come out and say the opposite, could they? They couldn't say, despite the fact that he's had no case to answer, the charges have been dropped, we think he's a rapist.
Yeah.
United couldn't legally say that, could they?
No.
That's, defamation, libel, whatever you want to say. So I understand why they haven't said that, but they've made a particular point of not just saying he was cleared. They've not just stuck to the legal line. They've also said, and actually, we don't, based on knowing more evidence than you do, the general public, we've seen more than you have, and we actually will go as far as to say, we don't think he did it. That's different to saying he had no case to answer or the charges were dropped. So they've gone a step further than not accusing him of the crime. They've basically absolved him of the crime or made an attempt to. So I get your point, and that's what I'm thinking as well. They couldn't go out and accuse him of it because that would be libel. But then they've actually gone one step further and said he didn't do it.
Yeah.
Which are two very different things.
Tina Totoka says, what will happen to Anthony then? There's these reports that Anthony could face some charges. We'll have to wait and see. Anthony's a different topic for a different day. Joshua says, this is the best news related to the club in over a decade. Thank God he's gone. Good riddance. Doc Rock, who's been a member of the Academy for 2 months, says, let's first admit the whole recording is none of our business. I know we want to know, but for the sake of the victim and family, they may have decided... sorry, is there more to this? Just they may have decided. I think, yeah, I get that. Robert Wilhelm says, playing football is a privilege, not a right. United should only have the best. People only feel differently because he was a talented player. Very sad. Gazaroo says, so basically he's legally innocent, but he's been tried and condemned by the public without being able to offer defence. But at the same time, Mason admits he's a TWAT and wants to go. So Mason Greenwood in his statement said he's made mistakes, didn't he? He's like there's like whatever that means.
Yeah.
So again, I mean, it's very difficult, isn't it? Because some of this is a bit ambiguous. It's like, well, I've made mistakes, but I haven't done what you think. But there's other things I need to take responsibility for. Yeah. What are those things?
Yeah, but you're not taking responsibility.
Also, as well, with Richard Arnold, we almost didn't talk about that. He says, we were provided with alternative explanations for the audio recording, which was an excerpt from much longer recording, and for the images posted online, because people almost not forget, but it hasn't been mentioned as much. Yeah. There were images of the alleged victim with injuries, saying that Mason Greenwood had caused these injuries. Yeah. Now he's saying, Richard Arnold, in his open letter, saying that they had an alternative explanation for those images. The images for me weren't as damning as the audio. Well, I'm not dismissing the images. I'm saying those images, you could argue, well, you don't know that he's caused those injuries. You could argue that. Yeah. You could say that. It's difficult to argue that he's not on that recording because it's obviously him, and he's saying the things he's saying, which you can hear, and you can say, well, that doesn't sound great, does it? He's saying horrible things. So I do feel these images were slightly different than the recording for a multitude of reasons. For me, the audio felt like the smoking gun almost. Yeah.
Well, that's the thing with these sorts of cases, is that whenever the man and the woman aren't in the same room being videoed or recorded or whatever, you can always say, I didn't do that, prove that I did it. And that's the thing with the images, which is why they've not, like you said, that you see them, but they haven't been circulated as much. The audio, like you said, unless your defensive is, that isn't me, then we know you've done something wrong. Do you know what I mean? Regardless of what comes either side of that, we know you've done something wrong there. Like, that's the thing with me. So I just think that, yes, you know, if you're not a picture of someone, and you know your own opinion is fine on whether you think those pictures were caused by Mason Greenwood, but it is always going to be difficult to say it definitely was. Prove that it was. You can't. That's why these sorts of cases have got such low conviction rates, because two people in a room by themselves and something happens, it's so hard to prove what happened exactly. One word versus another. The audio, we've heard it. And my opinion on that audio isn't going to change based on, you know, this rumoured and supposed longer audio and an alternative explanation that's been provided either in conjunction with that longer audio or just the existence of that longer audio. That's not going to change my opinion on things personally. But yeah, I think it's so hard to say that he's not done anything wrong or he's not done the things you think he did when he kind of does the thing you think he did just in that audio. So yeah, without you actually, and this thing of he hasn't had the chance to, he hasn't had the privilege of a court date or a trial in order to defend himself. He can still defend himself. He can still say, I didn't do this. He can still give this evidence out. Like, if he wants to, he can. So it's not, you know, I'm not going to sit here feeling sorry for Mason Greenwood like he hasn't had a chance to defend himself. Go on, then defend yourself. Say something. Say, prove why you didn't do it. Show us why you didn't do it. If you think that's something that he's owed or a right that he should have, do it.
Yeah. Just on that, on the sort of, because there's three sides to this now. You've got this Richard Arnold statement, you've got the club statement, you've got Mason Greenwood statement. On the Greenwood statement, the Greenwood side of this, he said that he's sort of in his defence almost, he said, I was brought up to know that violence or abuse in any relationship is wrong. I did not do the things I was accused of, and in February I was cleared of all charges. However, I fully accept I made mistakes in my relationship, and I take my share of responsibility for the situations which led to the social media post. So that's, again, there's so much conjecture here, isn't there, where you're going, okay, well, what does that mean? Does that mean this? Does that mean this? It's you can speculate quite a lot. I'd be interested to see how this pans out as well, because once he's released from the club, I'm guessing he can basically do what he wants in terms of press, media, interviews.
Yeah.
Rebuilding his career, rehabilitating, if you want to call it that.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm guessing we will see a Mason Greenwood interview. Whoever's looking after him, so his agent or whatever, who's trying to find him a new club, if he's got a club lined up, and if he wants to sort of carry on playing football, he may decide, right, I need to sit down and do an interview. When we were hearing reports last week that the club were thinking of bringing him back, one of the ideas was that he was going to do an interview to explain himself, and even an interview potentially with his partner. I don't know whether that's true or not, but there was certainly, that's kind of seems to make sense, doesn't it? Yeah. That he would give some sort of public appearance, some sort of statement, or not just a statement, but some sort of interview. And you'd imagine it'd have been a very sort of pre-planned one where he obviously knows the questions well in advance and
it's not going to be.
It's not going to be
with some kind of publication trying to trick him or trap him. It's going to be with United or his agent or whatever.
With it, here's the questions, here's what you're going to say, all that sort of stuff. However, that's not happening. Yabav Cole says, I'm glad you are on the right side of this. You are two dudes talking about a crime where the victim was a woman with super chats enabled move on. John B says to you, he's innocent people, basing your morality solely on the outcome of the judicial system is absurd.
Do you want to know?
He says he's glad the rat has gone. So he's obviously, he's not losing any sleep over Mason Greenwood leaving Manchester United. Mark Losper says, it's the right result, but we should never forget how awful this process has been. Yeah. Richard Arnold should fall on his sword for how this was managed. Brian Casey says, sad part is there's no winners in all of this. Yeah. I kind of agree with that. Michael Fagan says, this is a stupid decision in my opinion. Mike Tyson was in prison for similar reasons, but everyone loves him. Everyone deserves a second chance. I mean, there's a whole different sort of kettle of fish there to get into.
What is that for logic? Some people have forgiven one person for doing something horrendous, so we should forgive everyone for doing something horrendous. Not everyone's forgiven Mike Tyson, and if they have, they should rethink it personally.
Yeah, I think it's a completely different scenario, isn't it? View from the Stand says he was further arrested. This is in quotes. He was further arrested for threats to kill 2 days after the first arrest. Something not evidenced in the video. No mention of that. Right decision, but strange to judge him innocently and brutally handled. Hisham Al Saeed says, fair enough, he has a chance to rebuild his life and his career. Not at the best club in the world. Good riddance. Just on this though, like where do you think this Mason Greenwood goes for now? Because, like you say, obviously we've heard the audio. The club have said, look, we're getting rid of you, or you're moving on, a mutually agreement. And it might not be a popular thing, but there is a young lad here who's basically now been released from his club, is about to become a dad, has a lot of responsibilities, and is facing a crossroads to say the least. And he's not going to have any, there was talk in the statement about care of duty and all that sort of stuff. It does feel like the club is just going, right, okay, you can go away now, you're no longer our problem. Where do you think that leaves him? Because, and I know this is, people might disagree, but is there any form of rehabilitation? Is there not some form of, he needs to put his life back together? Because I'll be honest with you, I'm just where I'm coming from. I'm a firm believer in rehabilitation. I've been rehabilitating myself and, drug issues I had when I was younger. I know it's completely different. But I do believe that everyone should be rehabilitated. They should have the chance to rebuild their lives. They should have the chance to sort of move forward. I think a big part of that, though, you have to take responsibility for mistakes. You have to take responsibility for your actions. Otherwise, you're never going to get there. That it's just not. You're just not. That there has to be some form of accepting some responsibility, trying to learn from it, and trying to move forward. Where do you stand on that? Do you think that there is still a chance that he can rebuild his life and his career? It's obviously not going to be in United, but it's going to be presumably somewhere.
It feels like every sort of institution that is set up to help people overcome difficulties in their life, help rebuild and rehabilitate people. Every one of them has something in place, like you said, where it relies on you admitting fault, you admitting that there is something that needs changing, whether that be AA, whether that be reduced sentences for someone admitting that they've done a crime or a guilty plea. All of these things, all of these ways where we, as a society, that we sort of set up to allow people to come back from difficulties, because people should be able to rely on you admitting you've done something wrong.
Yeah.
And he's not. It's not. This thing of I ain't done anything, or I didn't do the thing you think I did. I've made some mistakes, which are this vague kind of, nonsense, really. To me, he's not admitted that he's done anything wrong in particular. He's certainly not admitted to an individual wrongdoing. I think that someone who hits a rock bottom and does something wrong and gets to a point where they clearly need rehabilitation, I believe that society should allow for that. But only if you admit that there is something that needs rehabilitating. This thing of we can I just get the exact quote on the last part of United's statement of how, or on his statement, sorry, that it would be best to do this away from Manchester United. The phrasing around that.
On his statement?
On his statement, I think at the end of that.
Yeah, he says, I intend the best decision for us all is for me to continue my football career away from Old Trafford, where my presence will not be a distraction for the club.
So basically, the only reason he's leaving United is because his presence would be a distraction.
I mean, to be fair, his presence is going to be a massive distraction at any club he goes to. I don't think he's going to go to any club where it's going to be like, people are just going to ignore what's gone on.
No.
I understand the spotlight. I do understand the spotlight at Manchester United is far greater than any other club. But something like this is going to follow him around for the rest of his career.
Yeah.
And if when he goes to another club, because I think a club will still have Mason Greenwood, regardless of what you think of him as a person, whether you think he's innocent or guilty. He's a very talented footballer, a very talented young footballer. He's still got at least a decade left at the top level if he can get back to the standards that we saw before he was suspended.
Just as a person rather than a footballer, do you think we've seen enough in terms of remorse, sort of like anything like that from him? Do you think we've seen enough of that?
I think we'll find out in the next few weeks. I think it's been difficult because obviously with police investigation, I presume the club have told him not to say anything, not to do anything while this investigation's going on. So we haven't really heard from him, have we? In terms of, he's not given any interviews, he's not put out any statements.
Well, he's put out that one.
Other than this one today. I'd be surprised if he wrote that. I think someone sat down with him and gone, look, how can we word this? He's obviously, I assume he's agreed to it and he may have had input on it, but I'm guessing that someone will have helped him write it at the very least. And I think it'll be quite interesting to see now, or quite telling, what happens in terms of him and the media. Does he do an interview with a newspaper? Does he do an interview on Sky or with the BBC or any media outlet where he's on camera and he gives a full-blown interview? Or does he just not? Does he say, I'm not speaking to the press, I'm going to get on with my life and see what clubs what I have made? I think there will be clubs that are interested in him. And also, I presume, again, it's not clear-cut, but if he's been released, I presume that he's going without a fee. So you're looking at a footballer, and again, you might not like the kid, but as a footballer, he's worth probably about 70, 80 million quid. And you can potentially now get him for nothing. And he's a goal scorer. And those players are in short commodity. So yes, there'll be a lot of clubs that say, listen, we don't want Mason Greenwood playing for us for the same reasons Manchester United don't. But there will be clubs that will say, we'll have him. We'll have a player that could probably come in and score us 15 Premier League goals or 15 league goals this season, which we know he can do. Yeah. We know he's at that level. So I still think he's going up somewhere. And I think, in answer to your question, we will find out. And we'll see how he feels about this. Because he might feel angry. He might feel, we don't know, he might feel, I've not done anything wrong and I'm being stitched up and this is horrible. That statement doesn't really give us a clear-cut sort of indication of how he's feeling. It's very much a statement that's been written, there you go, we'll put that out. The first sort of indication we'll get will be how he conducts himself or what he says when he's given an interview, and I presume he will be, but you never know, it might be media silence. I'll go through some comments and wrap it up. I don't want to keep going on and on and on over the same bits and pieces here. I want people to have the say though, because obviously this is an important topic and what I hear from you guys. Dable says, I'm so relieved. This was all managed so poorly, but I'm so glad the club aren't reintegrating him. I was preparing myself to really struggle to continue to support the club. The team, I love. We saw a few people saying that if they didn't want to, they didn't want to carry on supporting Manchester United if he was at the club. It wasn't just celebrities. I saw a lot of people online that were saying that as well. Enfi says, if we are believers in rehabilitation, our condemnation needs to be at the processes: judicial, the club, societal. Every process failed Mason and his accuser. I'm not quite sure you can just blame it on society and the club and the judicial process there. I think there is a bit of personal responsibility as well, in my opinion. Rodney Getrich says, so if you consider Mason an abuser? Do you just release him, or do you try and get him some type of fee for him? Again, I'm not 100% sure. It looks like he's just going to get released.
Yeah.
David Stock says continuing away from Old Trafford could be a loan. I looked at that and I did think that at one point, but I'm not so sure now. It does feel like he's going. Joshua says, I'm a lawyer. He was cleared of rape, nothing else. That doesn't mean he didn't abuse her. Statements are consistent with this. Try hard. Sammy says the statement says away from Old Trafford, not Manchester United. He will go out on loan. Felcher, who's been a member of the academy for 29 months, says, I'm absolutely gutted. Lad made a mistake. Should have got a second chance. United, at United, Joe said that you said that you never wanted. I think this is saying that you said you never wanted to see him in a United shirt again. Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the statement which you made after that audio came out, and I completely agree with what you said. The club won't talk about the recordings or photos unless they knew what was facts, and the club confirmed the recordings wasn't reliable to be used as evidence.
But this is the problem. Like, people who come out of this with that conclusion is Man United shouldn't. I don't think United should have said that. I don't think United should say we know more than you and we think he's innocent. I think that's really dangerous. There's no need to say that. Who does that benefit? Supposedly it makes United look slightly better. It makes Mason Greenwood look better. It certainly doesn't make the accused look any better, or the accuser look any better. I don't know what the point in that was.
Do you think there's any chance of him playing for United again? I know you don't know.
I won't rule it out because
there's just
how
like
we've
these
done
little
this whole thing.
A couple of people saying that doesn't look like. I don't think it is a loan. It feels like after all this they're going to release him and he's going. But is there going to be an option where he comes back, where they go, look, we have I don't know, he's still under contract. Is there going to be a part of his leaving process where they go, we have first refusal of you?
I would be shocked, and I think it would be a bizarre thing to do. I think any way that United look like they're profiting off this situation, or, I think even the idea of selling him is one that's going to have to take a lot of thinking about, because why are you making money on this? That's another thing, isn't it? I just think that the way they've phrased it, some of the ways they've phrased it, like you said, are slightly irresponsible, really, because there's no need to say that. There's no need to say, we know more than you and we think he's innocent, because now everyone's going to go, well, if we knew that, presumably we would think he's innocent as well, but we don't ever get to see it, we don't get to hear these alternative explanations, and maybe we will do one day from Mason or from someone else involved in the situation, but at the moment, it's basically them going, well, actually, we don't think he did it, and if you knew what we did, neither would you. Who does that help?
Yeah, I think everyone's there's people in the chat saying, look, he's innocent. People in the chat saying, if you listen to the audio, people in the chat saying good riddance, people in the chat saying he should be given a second chance. Very, very divisive. I get that, and I understand that there's lots of different opinions. And all I will say is anyone that's been affected by issues like that, make sure that you're sort of reaching out and speaking to people, because I know it's very sensitive, and some people, when they heard that recording, some people I know sort of heard it and were triggered by it, for want of a better word. Mark Joyce says this is a very worrying precedent, as now Anthony must be released if any charges are brought against him. Huge legal challenge from Mason Greenwood. Anthony's another story another day, and to be honest with you, I'd love to just be sitting here talking about whether we're going to sign Sofian Amrabat, or whether Dean Henderson's got Crystal Palace, or whether Manchester United should have had a penalty against Spurs, or rather than sat here talking about a footballer who is genuinely one of the most talented youngsters I've ever seen, one of the best finishers I've ever seen, and now his Manchester United career looks over. Yeah,
it does. And also, if the precedent we're setting is when there is seemingly good evidence that you have abused your partner, we let you go, I'm more than happy with that being the precedent that United set. So I wouldn't call it worrying personally. I think that's the right precedent to set rather than the wrong one.
Yeah, I agree. I think that there's too many complaints if it's like, oh, okay, if you abuse your partner, then you not got a future at Manchester United. But there will be people that disagree. Just like I said earlier, try and keep it respectful, and if you're struggling with all this sort of stuff, which is understandable, make sure you speak to someone. Listen, I'm going to wrap it up there. Joe, thanks for joining me on that. Thanks for getting involved. Everyone as well who got involved in the comments and the chat. The stories you all know, you can probably see. Manchester United announcing that Mason Greenwood will leave the club, and they've termed it as a mutual decision. We've had a statement from United, a statement from Richard Arnold, and a statement from Mason Greenwood. And now we just have to see sort of what happens with this next move. Is it a transfer? Is it release? What is going to go on? I'm sure more will become clear in the coming months. That's been Joe Smith. I'm Jay Motti. This has been a bit of breaking news. Thanks for watching.